Also, Seth, I'm gonna just mute you so I don't get the feedback. All right, hey everybody, welcome to February 4th's MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I work doing community development at the Maker Foundation. A little bit about me: I was part of the community for a couple of years before I actually joined the foundation. Huge Maker nerd. And I get to host and help facilitate these calls every week. So really fun to do that. Some of the stuff, kind of the purpose of the call is, MakerDAO is a wonderfully complex and quick growing protocol, and the ecosystem around it is just, it's like a Cambrian explosion this last year or two. So it's really hard if you have a day job to keep track of what's going on. So this community call is meant to be sort of like a 1 week in review for the Maker protocol, for the ecosystem in general. And also we use this call kind of to introduce guests, people in the space that are doing innovative, important, interesting things. And so for the first half of today's call, we're actually going to be introducing Molecule, Catalyst. I don't know which order that should go in: Catalyst, Molecule, Catalyst. But they are a crowdfunding platform for medical research, primarily, I think, pharmaceutical research. And they're tackling a really interesting problem. But don't hear it from me. I'm going to introduce them. We have Paul, Tyler, and Devon on the call. And so I don't know who's going to be primarily speaking, but I'm going to hand it off, I guess, to Paul first, because I believe Paul is one of the head honchos there, right?
Thank you so much, David. Great intro. Should I take it over?
Yeah. Go. Well, first, I would love to hear a little bit about you, Tyler, and Devon, and your roles in the company, and just a little brief overview of what you guys do. What's the problem you guys are trying to address? Yeah.
Cool. My name's Tyler Galato. I'm the chief scientist and co-founder at Molecule. My background's in biochemistry and molecular biology. I have a background in experimental therapeutics as well. After studying, went on to do a series of fellowships in experimental therapeutics and then biogerontology, so in the aging and longevity sort of space. Moved to South Africa, worked in HIV vaccine development for a period of time, and eventually met Paul. Left my previous position and joined Molecule full-time almost I guess a year and a half ago now. And we're trying to work to sort of democratize drug development. We're trying to change sort of the incentives that exist in the drug development space to allow additional stakeholders to become involved, to give power back to the public, and ultimately have an effect on this sort of drugs that are made available to patients, which I'll talk a little bit about today.
Tell me a little bit about the problem with the current drug industry. What are the main? I know there's monopolies. There's a ton of capital inefficiency. There's huge time delays in certain aspects of that whole system. Yeah,
I think it's something we could get into for hours probably. But if I was going to give a brief overview, so I mean, since the 1950s, drug prices, the cost of developing drugs has increased exponentially. In 1950, you could bring a drug to market for about $50 million, whereas today that figure is about $2.5 billion. The pharmaceutical industry sort of evolved into this highly complex, very expensive machine, and a lot of the low-hanging fruit has sort of already been picked. But essentially, I mean, I guess a high-level way to think about it is that it's a system that is really built on patent monopolies. It's a system where typically it was expected that a single institution would take care of everything from in-house R&D, sort of discovering drugs in in-house laboratories, moving those drugs through the preclinical development stages, all the way through to clinical trials, manufacturing, and marketing. And essentially, the industry has evolved really highly complex pipelines to deal with all those tasks. And in that sort of process, has really created a status quo where drugs are sort of so expensive to develop, where only the largest organizations that have access to a lot of capital are really able to sort of participate in drug development. And what's happened in that system is that really revenue is sort of the primary dictator of innovation at this point, which means that from a patient's perspective, or from someone, let's say, that has a rare disease perspective, it's not necessarily a system that's working in their favor. In a lot of cases, pharmaceutical companies, the sort of cost-benefit analysis for them is really simply whether or not a drug is going to be profitable. So what we're trying to do is reimagine a system where, let's say, something like an antibiotic, which archetypally might not be profitable for a pharmaceutical company to develop, could be collaboratively developed by, let's say, 20, 30 different stakeholders, universities, patient advocacy groups, even the general public, funding these sort of experiments, and then in exchange owning a share in the intellectual property for the drugs that they're developing. And sort of the example that I use is sort of, imagine if insulin was collectively owned by diabetics, the impact that would have on pricing, on accessibility. So we're trying to basically, it's almost like, and there's many sides to this, the platform is more or less agnostic to what is actually being developed, but it's creating a framework and creating a structure where you're taking something that is inherently monopolistic, like a pharmaceutical patent, still providing protections to investors and people who want to develop that drug, but allowing it to be really developed collaboratively in a way that makes sense for the people that it's ultimately going to affect. So, I mean, we're in a way, it's almost an entirely separate sort of pipeline from the traditional pharmaceutical industry, and one that takes advantage of the sort of fractionalization of that industry. So just one additional point. I mean, when I speak about pharmaceutical companies previously being highly integrated, sort of single institution overseeing everything, what we've seen happen today is that there are many companies and many organizations that are propping up, supporting one aspect of the drug delivery, drug development value chain. With Molecule, we're hoping to really bring together all those smaller stakeholders and potentially create a pipeline for drug development that doesn't even require a pharmaceutical company. So it's sort of an interesting, exciting development that could potentially challenge the system that currently exists.
Yeah, nice. That was a really great synopsis. Nice. So nice to meet you, Tyler. So what about Devon? Who is Devon?
Devon's.
I'm not actually sure that Devon is joining.
No worries.
Yeah,
no worries.
I think it's all of myself.
No worries. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. We could just do you guys. So all right. So bring me and the people on the call up to speed. Where are you guys today? I know you guys have I think a demo ready for us. You guys could, whenever you're ready, share your screen and show us a bit of the platform if you guys have anything ready about that. But really curious to see where you guys are on this journey, because I think that the vision is totally right on point. And a lot of the people that I've talked to about what you guys are doing are equally as excited. So would love to hear where you guys are at.
Paul, do you want to hop in there? And it's probably a good time for you to actually, I think you have a presentation prepared here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my signal might cut out a little bit. I'm hotspotting from a phone in Berlin.
Nice.
I'll give a little bit of background on myself as well. So I've been in the Ethereum space since about late 2015. Worked at Consensus for about 1.5 years. Also was a super early supporter of Maker, so really excited that we're actually able to leverage your system today.
So really quickly, just as a point of clarity, so what is your relationship to Maker, to DAI? Yeah,
absolutely. So I mean, we've been huge supporters for like the longest time. Essentially what we're doing a little bit to like oversimplify things, we're kind of bringing DeFi into early stage funding for researchers in therapeutics. Like that's one way to look at it. You could say a lot of researchers are currently, I mean, either their research is at the fringes, which means it's hard for them to access finance, or they're somewhere distributed on the globe. And what we're essentially doing is we're allowing the monetization of that research at a much earlier stage, essentially supplementing systems that were put in place 30, 40, 50 years ago. So grant funding systems that really haven't evolved. So it's a really interesting area as well to bring in kind of fintech and DeFi. And what our the first system that we launched on mainnet about, I think, 2.5 weeks ago, is a first clinical trial. We're together with Ronan Petracker from the University of Toronto. So it's a real life clinical trial on the effects of microdosing psilocybin, which we found a really interesting first use case area to support. There's a lot of ongoing research into psilocybin as a new treatment for depression, for PTSD. There's some really breakthrough work that has been done. And so this is a first kind of worldwide professional study on the effects of microdosing on creativity and multiple other elements that are being measured. And essentially what we're doing is we're crowdfunding this trial using DAI stablecoins. So all of the DAI is effectively directly paid to the researcher. And the fundraising mechanisms that we're using is using a bonding curve. So you're actually, through that process of donating DAI to this research, also acquiring a stake in the project. So you essentially, what we're aiming to do at a larger scale is essentially tokenize these research outcomes. And then in the next step, also tokenize the IP that can be generated through such a study. Yeah, so that's how we're currently leveraging the Maker system, allowing anyone in the world to kind of contribute to the study directly to the researcher, no middleman. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a ton of efficiency grab. I love it. That's really great. And I also want to just take this chance to say, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Or if you have a mic, hop on. Feel free to interrupt. Sort of the culture of this call is super laid back. And I think, Paul, you might be frozen, actually. I hope not, though. But on my screen, you're frozen.
I might freeze more than like I said, my signal's a bit dodgy, but you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I could hear you
Okay.
pretty well. Yeah, which means that the recording should be catching you pretty well. But
Okay.
yeah, so what's on the agenda next? You guys have like a working platform for crowdfunders?
Yeah. So if you guys want, we can quickly just run you through like a super simple slide deck of like how the system works.
Yeah.
And then really maybe give a little bit more information about the first trial, like what is actually, like if you fund this, what is actually happening. And then we can also just show you like a live demo of what the system looks like.
Yeah, let's do it. So Paul, maybe a good. So sorry to cut you off. Maybe a good, just to be responsible with time, maybe a good time keep would be, let's aim for the next 20 minutes is all you, so we can go to like 35 or 40 into the hour.
Cool. Yeah, that's a lot of time. Awesome. I just saw one question come through. I'll quickly answer that. Brian McMichael asked that he would love to see similar studies done with DMT. Actually, one of the universities that we're in discussions with is Johns Hopkins and their new psychedelic center, and they've suggested a study around that specifically. So maybe sometime in the future.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. I'm quickly going to just share my screen. And I hope you guys can like see it smoothly. Otherwise, I might have to ask Tyler to screen share.
While that's pulling up, Akiva Dubrovsky is asking, would this idea have been possible without DAI, or is the fact that you guys are doing using DAI really enabling the possibility of this platform and this vision?
I think it is in many ways, because so the alternative of not using DAI would have been using ETH or like any other more volatile token. And we kind of realized early on as we were engaging these researchers that the first notion that they have around cryptocurrency is like, this stuff is highly volatile, and like, will I get hacked? Will all of my money be gone? So those two elements. So on the one side, it was really important for us to get an audit, but on the other side, it was important to tell the researchers, no, like all the contributions that you're getting are stable. If Bitcoin crashes by 50%, that's not going to affect you. So that was a huge, okay, then this makes it much more trustworthy. So in many ways, yes. And the alternative of not using any crypto would have been running a traditional crowdfunding site. And the regulations for doing that are like tenfold, as opposed to like doing it in a non-custodial way. So our company is based in Switzerland. And if you do crowdfunding in a non-custodial fashion, where the funding goes directly from funder to the benefactor, the regulations around that are much more simplified.
That's cool. Absolutely awesome to hear. Yeah, that's you hit the nail right on the head for Akiva too. Nice.
Okay, cool. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. We did a quick intro. I'm just gonna maybe to just recap what Tyler really said initially. What our goal is at Molecule is that we want to. This is the current drug development pipeline. This is the current drug development pipeline. You see a lot of new potential molecules move through these different stages. Eventually, they hit phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then one of them actually makes it to market. That's why the drug prices are so high. This entire process used to be within single companies, And we're saying, you know what, let's de-silo that and move it into an open marketplace. So that's really kind of the bigger vision and platform vision that we're pursuing. How did this come about? Like a lot of our early, let's say, crypto economic thinking comes from two core factors. One are bonding curves, the other are NFTs. So using NFTs to represent IP or data on chain, the same way that a CryptoKitty is essentially like an asset, it's an art asset. We could do the same for a molecule or a fusion reactor. We then take that data and IP and attach it to an NFT. And then we use a bonding curve as a price discovery and funding mechanism for that piece of IP. And what you can now do is essentially you can trade shares in molecules, therapeutic, or various forms of IP. There's a few articles that we've written on this topic, so I won't go too much in depth. We see bonding curves as a really interesting way as prediction markets. So in our case, positive research data around a specific asset would increase its price, and negative research data might decrease its price. So market participants can kind of trade now on scientific data that is emerging. And they also have incentives to reveal more data to the market. And this plays into a really interesting notion, which is open science. And how do we create incentives for open science? And that's where we feel that this is really, really interesting. There's also funny implications for insider trading once you start moving into this.
I actually have a quick question about that. So if you can go back a slide. So in the game theory of that, what happens if go forward one more slide to the bonding curve? No, forward two. I think we might be delayed. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So negative research data decreasing the price of a token that belongs to a research project's bonding curve. So what happens? Because I understand that during the research phase there could be a lot of negative research and positive research. There could be mistakes in methodology, things of that nature. So do you expect there to be kind of an emerging best practices around when research data is actually published? It seems like there's a lot of gray area there, when you intercept the market with research data. It feels like the researchers would kind of try to game it, right?
There is, and I think it's a highly fascinating field. I think so what we're doing at the moment really consider these experiments, but I think this is kind of where some of this might go. What makes this market-based approach really interesting, I think, is because it makes negative data valuable that currently isn't valuable. And there's a broader big problem in the scientific community, which is reproducibility. And so often someone will publish a result that they achieved after 100 99 failed results, and one of them kind of came through, and then no one is able to reproduce this. And so this could be negative research data. So you only publish the positive result, but not the negative result. So people now have an increasing incentive to actually scrutinize and analyze more of these results because they stand to potentially have economic gains from doing so.
Right, exactly. And actually, so we had a guest on the call. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. It was a guy from Gnosis. They were doing a prediction market thing, and part of their research was that if you attach a prediction market to anything, it actually creates interested researchers. So people digging into the validity of the data and the integrity of the data. So yeah, that was a really interesting insight that seems to be recurring.
Any sort of public market around this, I think the obvious implication is additional scrutiny, which in my opinion is almost always a positive, especially in the context of the sciences.
Hell yeah. Right on. All right.
Cool. Oh yeah, David, maybe to a last point, but this is I think this is a fairly new space, and there'll definitely be gray areas evolving around this.
Of course.
And new best practices that need to be developed. Cool. So let's talk about molecular catalysts. So molecular catalyst is really kind of our first experiment of what the system could work like on a platform. There's obviously a lot of complexities, a lot of different stakeholders. And so we launched our first app on mainnet on the 16th of January. And it's been live since. And I'll talk you a little bit through just very simply how the system works. So funders can contribute to campaigns on Catalyst using the cryptocurrency DAI. They make a contribution. They can discover peer-reviewed research initiatives that are looking for funding. Then through the platform, through our set of smart contracts, the funding goes automatically to the researcher. In return, the researcher submits research data through the platform. And in return, funders receive a unique project stake in the respective project. Now, depending on what the project does, this stake can initially, or like this stake is initially considered as a donation because there is no IP associated with this project, or there is no IP created yet. So some of the projects that we have would essentially only file for IP after initial research data has been created. That, for example, can show that this molecule has a new, has very interesting properties that should be patented. But so initially, a lot of these contributions are considered donations.
Frank said something really funny. He said, "Update the DAI symbol." Yeah, you guys are slacking.
Yeah.
You guys are slacking. So sorry to interrupt. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we'll get that updated. But yeah, so this is the very basic user interaction. Really a simplified, dialogue. We can get deeper into the bonding curve design behind this. But something that was really important for us was to abstract away from, I think, the complexity that bonding curves cause with a lot of people. It's a hard concept to understand. So also, when you guys are going to check out our live app later, you'll see that basically, unless you want to, the bonding curve is really in the background as a UI and UX element. Maybe just some quick highlights to go through. So using DAI really makes our campaigns globally accessible. Because we manage all our funds through Ethereum smart contracts, it reduces fees, it improves transparency in this fundraising process. It's really the first application of token bonding curves for fundraising and research. I would go as far as saying it's the first application of bonding curves for any real-world use case on a mainnet. And what we're trying to do with this is really like a tokenized reward system. So obviously, contributors that join in early have an incentive to spread the campaign to other people to get them to contribute. Because at the end, early contributors might stand to still make a return just based purely on the contributions that went through the smart contract. So yeah, early contributors are incentivized to promote the campaigns. And researchers are now encouraged to share the results continuously with their supporter base as soon as results are available. Because obviously, if the results are good, then more funding flows into the campaign. If the results are negative, then maybe this project shouldn't be continued. But even there, as we said earlier, David, there's still, I think, gray areas. And I think we'll need to develop carefully how quickly you can release results, because there's obviously always a fine line. Cool. Next up, I want to ask Tyler to talk a little bit about our first fundraising campaign.
Cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it would be worth starting out by just talking a little bit about the reasons why we're focusing on a few sort of specific therapeutic or research areas. Although I'm also going to be mindful of time. But really, the core focus in the sort of, let's say, over the next few years in terms of onboarding initial projects onto Catalyst and expanding that is really focused around three sort of discrete therapeutic areas or research areas. The first is psychedelics research, really because of the implications that it could have in transforming how we think about mental health. The second is aging and longevity, primarily for the implications it has for preventative medicine and the development of preventative therapeutics. And the third being rare and orphan disease, which is, I guess, more or less obvious just because of the inherently underfunded area where there's not a huge amount of interest from the pharmaceutical industry. I'm just going to share my screen quickly, so bear with me for 2 seconds.
Go for it.
Cool. Can you guys see this okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the first trial that we've gone live with, Paul mentioned it briefly. It's in partnership with the University of Toronto, Roden Petranker, and Thomas Anderson, who have just formed the Toronto Center for Psychedelic Science. And this is going to be one of the first, I believe, the first clinical trial in history to study the effects of microdosing psilocybin in a laboratory environment and using laboratory-grade psilocybin. Canada has a super rich history of psychedelics research. There was a long period of sort of, yeah, I mean, in the 1950s, I believe in Saskatchewan, the term psychedelic was actually invented. There was a really, really rich history all over Canada from the 1950s until about the mid-1960s. And then sort of a global dark period in psychedelic studies. It It was criminalized in the United States and Canada, sort of worldwide, following the days of Timothy O'Leary. And now only in the past really 5 to 10 years have regulations started to loosen a bit, to the point where governments are now starting to actually support more broad research efforts into understanding the effects of psilocybin and other psychedelics. What's particularly interesting about this trial is that it's actually not looking at the effects of psilocybin or on microdosing psilocybin on things like anxiety or depression. It's really just trying to fundamentally understand the effects, which is one of the things that makes this extremely unique. So I mean, for anyone with an interest in microdosing in a very generalized context, this will be one of the first clinical trials that's actually providing direct evidence on the effects in a laboratory controlled way. The Toronto Centre is looking to raise funding to enroll 100 participants, and this would ultimately result in a world-class precedent in responsible psychedelics research, reliable estimates of the effects of microdosing, and also really providing much needed participant safety data that's crucial to future policy discussions around the risks and rewards of psychedelic use. All participants who participate in the trial will attend a baseline before being randomized into 4 weeks of either receiving a placebo and then subsequently receiving psilocybin, or receiving psilocybin and then subsequently receiving a placebo. And so both groups will at some point receive psilocybin, and the point of this sort of crossover washout design is to see that at the point of cessation, so stopping to take the microdose of psilocybin, how long are those sort of effects really sustained? And the primary research targets here are really looking at creativity, mood, and focus. Like I said earlier, this is really interesting because it's asking sort of a fundamental question about microdosing psilocybin. So like, what are the actual effects on these sort of endpoints that many people evaluate when they begin microdosing? There's also secondary research targets into social connection, self-efficacy, and mindfulness. And ultimately, all of this is going to result in a rich source of exploratory analysis that will provide a critical precedent for I think, fair, responsible, and impactful psychedelics research worldwide. So, I mean, just another thing to consider is that the outcomes of this trial will likely be cited broadly for most future studies that are beginning to build on this and look at outcomes for this trial. Additionally, this group has a really strong focus on open science. They have a really strong focus on trying to make their research and their data accessible to the general public. So as a function of this clinical trial completing, they'll publish 4 open access papers that are freely available, speak at 4 conferences, publish 2 broad knowledge mobilization pieces, which will make sort of the results known to the public, even independent of their academic publishing, and then formulate a multi-study follow-up plan using this data. And then they can actually begin to look more specifically at the effects on specific, for example, pathological indications, things like anxiety, depression, etc. Yeah, so that's the first trial that we're supporting. That's live now. You can actually go onto Catalyst and support that project immediately, and it's really, yeah, we feel this is an extremely exciting moment, not only for DeFi, not only for research, but also for the psychedelics community, getting to move forward with these sort of projects, and also having really interesting and intriguing forms of fundraising that connect the public more or less directly to the project.
So I have a couple questions. I would love to hear some metrics about how much was raised already. And also, I assume this program is also raising money outside of your platform, right? Naturally, like it seems like they do need quite a lot. So my question, maybe let me kind of line them out. So number one is, how did you guys find them, and how did they come to be on your platform? Do you guys screen generally people that are allowed to fundraise on your platform? And maybe we could just start there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I believe probably for the next year or 2, I mean, we receive applications for projects on Catalyst, but this project and the next few projects that we're going to be launching are really projects that were handpicked by us. This was going after. So, I mean, broadly looking at these individual spaces, longevity, psychedelic studies, identifying the researchers who were among the top in their field and have a great track record, a great reputation of working in this field, and who are trying to do groundbreaking work. I reached out to Rotem maybe 6 to 8 months ago, when I had read a little bit about his work in the space. He's been one of the leading researchers on microdosing over the past couple of years. Is hugely respected. And he's also a person who's often advocating sort of open science principles, data sharing, et cetera. So just based on his profile, it seemed like it would be a perfect fit. We reached out to them, reviewed sort of their all of the key materials for the trial. So that they filled out sort of what would be akin to like an extensive grant application. And had a great relationship immediately. They sort of understood what we were trying to do. We understood what they were trying to do. And this is a key thing for us right now. Like as Paul mentioned, this is the first project we're launching. We really want this to be a success. We really want to be able to support work that we know is impactful. It's important for us at this stage to ensure that the projects on Catalyst are really high quality and really impactful. Does that answer?
Yeah, that answers the question perfectly. Yeah, right on. That's awesome. And then my next question was, what is the relationship between Catalyst and the research project, and then the people funding it? So I know you mentioned it was non-custodial, that the funds get transferred directly. So does that mean that every single research program has to have some sort of like on-off ramp way to realize the DAI if they are, because I assume they're not spending the DAI, since DAI hasn't grown to that level of adoption yet, but they are going to be doing some sort of transfer. Do you guys like transfer of DAI into fiat? Do you guys envision like partnering with people like Wire, for example, or whatever, to help streamline that for future like research trials or research groups?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice, good answer.
would be the easiest answer. We've had simple discussions on how researchers can offboard. It's actually cool because you can if they're into it, they can get into the space themselves.
Yeah,
like one of the easiest way for them to offboard might just be via Coinbase because it's like fairly regulated. It's like simple for them. But then yes, like Ramp or Wire would definitely be great ways to like on and offboard. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, and then my last question.
Maybe something else to mention. So all the funds for the researcher are kept in a vault, and that vault is then directly paid out to them, but only if the funding goal is actually met. So,
there is conditionality built into to these crowdfunding projects.
Yes. So it's a similar thing like Kickstarter. Like obviously, if someone's doing a clinical trial and they only raise $10,000, like the trial isn't going to happen. So like the money then gets repaid to all of the contributors.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So which also decreases the risk of you like contributing.
One thing that I think is also important to clarify. Sorry, Paul, but not to cut you off. But I mean, with this first trial, this is sort of a first experiment. The tokens in this project don't necessarily represent rights to IP or anything like that. But with future projects, as soon as the second project that we launch, we're looking at essentially tying intellectual property rights or future rights to intellectual property directly to the token, which I think creates an extremely interesting dynamic. And it's an important point to get across that this is really. This first project is really sort of a donation-based project, a first experiment. Just seeing sort of the market dynamics that evolve and looking at how people interact with the bonding curve, et cetera. But the complexity of this is going to increase exponentially as we begin to explore actually attaching various things to those tokens.
Yeah, and it sounds like the platform is, it should be bootstrapped by angel investors. It should be bootstrapped by people that are not struggling for capital, people that have capital, that believe in your vision, that think that what you're doing actually does create efficiency and solutions for people that are priced out of the whole research and development of drugs, right?
What's been super exciting is even with regards to like when you're talking about like on and offboarding and like someone like Rotem with this first project is so interested what we're doing fundamentally is like this sort of different model that someone like him is he's not really into the crypto ecosystem, but he's like, show me how to do it, like sign me up, show me what I need to do, we can receive DAI. Like that's totally cool, which is something that there are a lot of academics and there are a lot of people working in research that are really, really frustrated with the system that currently exists and the way that things sort of are. So what we've been surprised by is, I guess, the the likelihood of or the willingness of people to entertain maybe an unconventional, seemingly abstract model in many ways, just because it is something fundamentally different that could sort of like influence change in the system, and that's also something we're really excited about.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. All right, I have one more question, and then I'll open up to the chat, and if we're good, we could wrap it up. Yeah.
I also wanted to say quickly, if you guys want, I can show like a 1-minute demo of like me actually just like showing what the app looks like.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Share your screen, and while you're sharing your screen, I'll ask kind of my own final question. So with this first research, project, or I actually don't know like the actual term to call them, but how much money has been raised so far through the platform, and what are the first users looking like? I assume it's like people that you guys are directly in contact with, might be helping to bootstrap your project. Yeah, what are the metrics like around money raised so far?
Okay, so if you actually can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Oh, cool.
Okay,
Good.
cool.
Nice.
Also, so this answers your question.
Yes, it does.
If you guys want to go onto the live app, it's catalyst.molecule.to. And then, so basically here you could discover different projects that are in various funding stages. Obviously right now, because we've just launched, we have one project on there. So I'm just going to click on the project. And now you can see this is Ronan Petranko, the co-founder director at the Toronto Center for Psychedelic Science from the University of Toronto.
Great.
So you see here the first clinical trial. You can have you have an overview of so this is all live, by the way. Just feel free to go onto the system. You have an abstract of what this study is supposed to do. You have the funding status of the current project. So to date, we've raised, I actually think it was just under 5,000, but some people withdrew again, which is the beauty of like the system in a way.
Right.
There's a lot of things that we still want to add, but so to date, we've raised just under 10%. We obviously still need to make a big push, but like we're super cool. Like it's super cool what we've achieved today. We're also expecting in the next couple of days, we have two kind of, let's say, larger private donors who should push up the total funding amount to under 30%. And so what you'll see here as well, this is structured into several phases. So essentially, once one phase with 50,000 DAI is funded, then the first clinical trial can kick off. And obviously, the more money is raised through the system, the more patients can come into this this clinical trial. Just looking through it, if you want to go into like the details of how the bonding curves work and its pricing, you can kind of see that here. You can see what the current price is at, the current total supply, also what is staked into the market. You can read more about the team, the biography. There's a lot of information essentially about the project and also the results that will be gained from it. And then I can go through this live quickly. I can say, I just put 20 DAI into this account. I can say, you know what, let me actually just.
The UI looks super clean. How long did you guys spend developing like the actual website and the app?
I'd say about 3 to 4 months.
Good job.
Yeah. Cool. So now I just said contribute support this project. Praying to the demo gods. Sometimes my MetaMask can be glitchy.
And so for those of you on the call that don't really know much about bonding curves, really interesting. They're almost like automated market makers. Like if you're familiar with Uniswap, like it's almost like that, but not exactly. Basically, you can enter and exit a market, and the price at which you enter and exit is automated by an underlying like mathematical formula, right? And based on how many, I hope I'm explaining it right because I'm still personally trying to wrap my head around them, but they have really cool use cases for stuff like prediction markets, for automated like exchanges. Like there's a lot of application, and actually like there's a grantee of ours. So the community development department in Maker, we do development grants, and we actually funded a project called Protea, And Protea uses it creates communities, and to buy into a community, you have to buy into sort of the community's token, which sits on a bonding curve, right? And it's really cool because organic, healthy communities, they tend to grow. But of course, yeah, there's so much cool stuff going around that. But yeah.
So maybe if I can explain in the background, like we have to wait, obviously, because these transactions are being mined live on mainnet. I think mainnet is a little bit congested at the moment. But so essentially, I have to confirm two transactions. One is that this app may spend my DAI, and then the other is to confirm the actual token creation. And so this moment, like essentially what we're doing now, I've sent 10 DAI to the bonding curve contract, which in return is now giving me tokens in the project and is also forwarding the respective DAI from the bonding curve itself into a vault and then keeping it in a reserve in the bonding curve. And cool, my transaction is confirmed. I've now successfully funded this project. And in return, I received 3.97 tokens in this project.
Nice.
And yeah, that was it. I can now essentially also go on like a tab to see my projects. I can see the current value of the project tokens and how they grow over time on the bonding curve. Yeah, there's a lot of features that we want to add over the next couple of just weeks. Like different feedback that came through from people. We've already implemented one feature, for example, that you can now also like easily swap any token for DAI.
That's cool.
And then put it directly. So if you have some ETH or some other token, and you say, "Cool, I want to throw that token into like Catalyst to fund this project," then Uniswap will automatically just swap it for DAI. So you don't even send it.
This is such a great example of why I really love blockchain, because you can just embed you can embed protocols in websites like permissionlessly, and you could have an exchange right there in a research funding, crowdfunding plot. Like, that's so cool. Anyway, yeah, it's 45 minutes, so we got 15 minutes to go through the rest of what I had planned for the call. But I'm really glad that we spent some time checking you guys out, because you guys have quite a lot to show, quite a lot to say, quite a lot in the pipeline, and generally speaking, a lot of people are really excited. And Igor wants to ask a question. Yeah, Igor, hop on the mic if you got one.
Hey guys, how's it going? Big fan of you guys. I saw your work maybe like 2 months ago amongst the apps, and I wanted to ask a quick question about the ethics of buying into this, especially if you're a researcher on the project. I know that the FDA and the institutional review boards have a huge issue with how people are funded and how they're related to the project. If you're a researcher on this and you put in your own money, you put in your own DAI, do you guys foresee any, ethical concerns and any issues with these boards allowing for the research to take place in places like the United States, where it's a little more stringent?
Really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, from a certain level, we don't know the identities of people who are contributing to Catalyst, for example. So it would be a little bit difficult to prevent that, although it is sort of there is a clear ethical boundary there. I would also say that, I mean, as far as I know, and I could be mistaken about this, but websites like experiment.com, for example, where people are typically raising small amounts of funds for research projects, there might be exceptions for that sort of thing in the context of crowdfunding, and when there's not any expectation that someone could sort of, yeah, I mean, if somebody's donating money to their own research laboratory, for example, purely to be used for research, I'm not sure if that would necessarily count as a violation. But yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm not too sure. I mean, we obviously can only suggest and encourage people to adhere to basic ethical standards in the sciences. There's not so much that we could do to prevent that, but it's definitely, I guess, something that we need to consider quite strongly in the future and think a bit about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the issue would be regional, because every country has their own regulatory body, and every institution has their own regulatory body. So where some institutions might be okay, others will be like, hey, this isn't kosher. But I know this is like a off-bat question for you guys, and I'll continue to follow as things go along. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for sure. Great question, great point.
Yeah, that was a really good question. And there's a there's another question, but I kind of want to wrap up. Seth was asking, where's the revenue generated from IP? How does it flow back through the system? And I think maybe in the future, you guys can come on the call again. I would love to have you guys come on maybe in 6 to 8 months, something like that, and see where the platform's at, how you guys are doing. That would be really fun. But I think for the last 12 minutes, we're gonna do.
Just quickly, if anyone has any other questions in the future, join our Telegram, join our Discord. We could engage around stuff like this directly. More than happy to answer additional questions. On your own time. Thanks so much.
Right on. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Drop some contacts. Definitely, guys, join their Telegram. Ask questions. Absolutely. Thank you guys, Tyler, Paul, for coming on the call. Really appreciate it. This was amongst one of my favorite community calls to date. Really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it was great being here.
Yeah, cheers. Such a pleasure, and thanks for the support.
Cheers. All right, cool. So next up on the agenda, we're going to cover some stuff speedily. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to go through what I can of the agenda. If you guys are here, you guys could check out the agenda in the chat. I link everything that I talk to or even plan on talking to, so feel free to check it out. But the first section I'm going to go through is governance, what's going on in the land of governance at Maker. So actually, today, late in the evening or in the morning, however you want to see it, a recent executive vote was passed. So the DSR went from 7.75% up to 8.75%. The Ethan BAT stability fees went up from 8% to 9%. The size stability fee on the old system went up from 9 to 10%, so it's a little bit more expensive to borrow Psi than DAI. And I believe we're hoping to incentivize migration through that little bit, but really people should be migrating regardless. And then the Psi ETH debt ceiling on the old system was lowered from 45 to 30. So those are just some of the changes this week. Actually, maybe I could, I'm going to quickly share my window, so it might be a little easier to cover. So you guys don't have to look at me doing a speech all monotonously. So yeah, so executive vote passed, and it passed with 61,000 MKR, which is pretty good. But we saw the governing proposal beforehand at its height. I think it had something like 90,000, might have been even 100,000, but I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. We have our usual weekly governance polls running. So they run Monday through Thursday, and they're listed below. So I'll talk to them. There's no special governance polls this week. Often we have kind of like ones that aren't recurring. So this week it's super vanilla. It's just all the recurring ones. And these are the recurring ones. So the size stability fee adjustment, the winning option so far is 9%. So the next executive vote might be, if this remains by Thursday, it might be that it's going to go back down to 9%. The winning option so far for the DAI stability fee adjustment is 8%. So also, the change that happened this morning might be reversed if this consists. And then the DSR spread adjustment, which just says what's the difference between the DSR and the stability fees. And that's currently being voted up to 50 basis points, so 0.5%. So for context, if the DAI stability fee is 8%, then that means that the DSR would be 7.5. Right now, the DSR spread is set to 25 basis points, which is why you're seeing a 25 basis point difference between the stability fee and the DSR. Yeah, so summary of Thursday's risk and governance call is not out yet. It should be out tonight, God willing. And then if you are an MKR token holder and you vote, check out Governance at a Glance. It has all of the sort of weekly stuff that's going on in governance. There's a bunch of signal request threads that are looking for input from our community. Definitely encourage you to read through them. I'm not going to go through them individually right now, but definitely check them out. I think maybe I'll mention what could be the most. You know what? Yeah, they're all fairly interesting. I definitely suggest going on forums, checking out the current conversations, and giving feedback if you feel that you have good insight. Partnerships and integrations this week. We saw the Sandbox, which is a game, do a little announcement. They're going to be integrating DAI, which is pretty fun. I didn't see any other partnerships, integrations, grants. I probably missed them. So definitely DM me if you want me to add them on next week. Stuff from the foundation. So our monthly Making Maker post is out. You could kind of see a monthly overview from the foundation's perspective of what's been going on in the Maker universe. We've also started a really cool blog series. So this series is meant to onboard people that are very new to crypto. And so, the first one is kind of like the most vanilla post you could get with crypto. Like, what are the benefits? What's the whole point of it, right? And so we're going to be releasing a whole bunch that kind of builds people up into using it practically and getting into this budding space called DeFi. And then the last one is mainly for the developers and the people that are working in the space. Oasis Dex, which is the foundation's centralized exchange that has been around forever. The contract will be expiring and it will be upgraded. This is important if you have dApps that are integrated with Oasis, and you could find out more information in that Reddit thread. So yeah. Highlights from the community. So some really cool stuff happened. I don't know if this is a highlight from the community, but it might as well be, because I think the whole community was super excited to see that the first surplus auction happened. And actually, on top of that, there was a really cool website launched this week too, called daiauctions.com. And as many of you might know, many of you might not know, there are auctions happening as a result of the Maker protocol. There's auctions for CDP or vaults that go underwater that need to be basically sold off and covered for their debt. And you can see all those here. And this is a very new website, so obviously take it with a grain of salt. A lot of technical details on here. But right here in the flap, which is just the technical name for the surplus auction, you could see the surplus auctions happening. And there have been 4 so far. They've been happening at a rate of about 1 a day, 1 every 20 hours approximately. And as you could see, people are bidding up and buying MKR. Buying DAI with MKR that's then burned, which is really exciting because, yeah, it's just great to see. We've all read it in the white paper for years, and we've waited. MCD coming soon, and finally we're seeing that the surplus is full, and that every 10,000 above that gets auctioned and deleted from the supply. So really fun times. Yeah, DAI Auctions, really cool website as well. So No Origin and MakerDAO are doing a creative challenge. Actually, this is really cool. It's you can make an NFT sticker pack and be eligible to win a part of a 1,500 DAI prize pool. Check out this Medium post for info. It's kind of like a sticker pack that includes tons of people using DAI, a lot of our grantees, MakerDAO in general, and even ETH Denver that's coming up. So if you're creative and you're thinking of how to earn some DAI, check out the creative challenge. All right, cool. And then next I saw, so Dune Analytics, as a result of Matteo Leibowitz's original post, created a live PE ratio chart, which is really cool if you think about it. Because Maker protocol is on the blockchain and these numbers are live, every 15 seconds you essentially get a live audited update of like the whole balance sheet and values and everything in the system. Now you could every 15 seconds get an updated PE based on like a pre-crafted script, and it's really, really, really cool. But don't take it from me. If it's not cool to you, it's not cool to you, but it's really cool to me. All right, developer creations. DAI Stats got a burn button, and actually last week it got a heal button. So if you don't know about that, really quickly, the heal button. Oh, and that's because I'm not on MetaMask, but there would be a heal button here and a burn button here. But the heal button lets you take the system debt and subtract it from the system surplus. So you're like taking the liabilities of the business and you're subtracting it from the assets, which is really cool because anybody could do it for a couple pennies of ETH. And then the burn is just taking the old MKR that's in the old burner, which so the old system stability fees end up here. In the new system, they don't. In the new system, they are disposed of through surplus auctions. But here, you could hit the burn button, and I would show you guys that button, but I'm not logged into MetaMask currently. So yeah. What else? ZK DAI is here. So Aztec had flirted earlier this year about doing private DAI transactions on Ethereum mainnet, and apparently it's here. I am not technologically as sharp as many of these people, but if this is true, then it's a really, really cool tool in general. It makes DAI like cash, quite literally. Next, we have MakerBurn.com. They added DAI in the DSR, maker price, and annual burn to their graphs. So they did this really cool thing where originally they just had this front page that was listing the stability fees. I think now it's between both the protocols and all these cool stats. But now they added kind of a couple more buttons. So one is this, which is very similar to DAI stats, and I think Mariana Conti might be a little jealous of this. But they also added this, which is really cool. It's a single graph. It's time over amount, and you could kind of add and subtract whatever you want. So if you want to see, for example, the maker price, it's there. DAI in DSR has been climbing. The size supply has been dropping. The annual maker burn went through a little dip, but it's rising, et cetera, et cetera. So really cool, useful tool for people that just want a quick snapshot of current system metrics. The next one, the author of, is actually in the call, but Hadaikin is a really cool transaction. It's a one-call transaction and performs a bunch of stuff in the Maker protocol. It heals the system debt and surplus. It drips the pot and jugs, which means that it just updates the actual smart contract values for the balances of DAI and DSR. That's what pot is. And then the debt of all vaults. So stability fees accrue on your DAI balance in your vault, and that's what the jugs is. So when you drip it, it updates system-wide. Those two variables. So it's really cool. And then also it kicks off flap auctions if they're ready. So yeah, really epic name, Hadaikin. Yeah, right there. Oh, yes, love that. That's art right there. I want to get that framed. So really great job to I think it was Brian. Yeah, Brian, great job. Really good stuff.
Hey David, thanks.
Really good stuff. Really good stuff. Anyway, moving forward. Yeah, Sahabia, our ambassador guy. Maria, you cracked me up. But Sahabia in Ghana launched his DeFi Africa website to educate people. So Sahabia is actually one of our most active recipients of meetup grants, and he's been building out and educating people about DAI and DeFi out in Ghana. Really great dude. Super charming, super smart. And it's been really cool to see DeFi in Africa grow. Shouldn't be under developer creations though. Although actually, I guess it's a website. So yeah, sure. All right. We're 2 minutes over. All right. I'm speeding this up. All right. So articles, yeah, 50 million DAI earning 8%. Well, 8.75% now. And then 2 million ETH locked. Yeah, that's a cool metric that we hit, but actually subsequently went down. So there's not 2 million ETH locked currently. I think there's like 1.95 or something like that. And then a couple of videos. So there was an interview with one of our BD guys, Gustav Arentoft, who's doing BD. He's head of BD in Europe. And yeah, he talks a bit about how MakerDAO could change the crypto space and whether or not it's the killer DApp of Ethereum. And then also we saw a DeFi programming tutorial, which I love these. Interact with DAI from Solidity and Web3. Definitely check that out if you're a programmer, you want some tutorial on how to get started. Yeah, I'm not a programmer, so I don't know how good this video is, but I assume it's good. So check it out. And then just really quickly, a couple of real life events. We're going to be participating in OX Po 2020 in San Fran, and we're going to be, and that's on the 7th, so in a few days. And we're also going to be participating in fintech-themed meetup with Bitwala and Gnosis in Berlin. So yeah, if you're in Berlin, check that out. I don't have an event link for that, but I can find one potentially soon. Yeah, so 3 minutes left in the call. We were going to do a system segment of the week whenever there's like a bit of time left at the call, but since we don't have time, I'm going to move that the review of the VAT and the VOW to next week. And if you're curious about what that is, where is that gorgeous system graph that I love so much? So this is the VAT right here, and this is the VOW, and they deal with all of the system balances. Internal balances, fault balances. It's like core part of the system, and the purpose for doing this segment of the week is so that little by little, if you're interested, if you're in the community, you could learn a little bit more about the protocol on like a technical level of how it works, because it is quite frankly, a really elegant solution to facilitate what DAI is and what the protocol enables. So yeah, thank you guys for coming on the community call. I'm gonna stop presenting. Only 4 minutes over. Thank you so much again to Paul and Tyler for coming on. And I hope this call was valuable to you guys. Definitely feel free to ping me anywhere. It's David Utro, pretty much on any platform that you could think of. If you are interested or know anybody who's doing an interesting project relating to DAI, DeFi, put them in touch with me. I'd love to have them on the call. I'd love to see their progress, where they're going. And I think this call has been really blessed over the last few months to have a lot of really cool guests. So definitely want to keep that going. And in general, reach out to me. This is a community call. I'm just the facilitator. So if you guys have cool ideas for debates, whatever segments of the call, I'd love to hear them. DeFi Zap, Frank Cruz is asking. Yeah, you could put me in touch with DeFi Zap. I actually tested them out the other day. They're pretty cool platform. Yeah, cool. So thank you guys. I'm gonna hit the stop recording button.